Good morning.
Good morning, Steve.
Hope you're well. Welcome to Milk and Honey this morning. I've already started recording because it's 9 o'clock, and just want to welcome all the listeners and Lucia again for joining me. This morning's subject is quite heavy and difficult to speak about, but such an important one. So I just want to, is there anything you would like to say this morning before we start, Lucia?
No, thanks, Steve. You can go ahead.
Okay, so I think the first thing I want to just say or talk about is to give you the reason why I want to do this talk today. Let me just adjust my camera a little bit. There we go. So I've been in ministry now, full-time ministry now for about, 13 years. And there was a season where Abba really took me, he threw me into the deep end with counseling and deliverance. I really didn't know anything, and I had to learn the hard way. There was nobody taught me, no course that I was able to do. Yes, and the sad thing that I can tell you today is that 98% of the women that I've counseled or dealt with have been victims of sexual abuse.
Sure.
And it's not because I only deal with victims of sexual abuse. That is just how common it is.
Sure.
And it is just so sad. I'll never forget a couple of years ago when I was at my first camp, women's ladies camp. I was just an attendee, and it was one of Sarah's camps. And on one of the sessions, we spoke about trauma and sexual abuse. And at the end of the session, they asked everybody who have been in a situation like that in the past to please stand up or to put up their hands. And I think it was also about, 90% of the people there. And I just realized, I've been so fortunate to not have gone through something like this in my life. I always try to teach and to counsel out of a place of what I have experienced, my own experience. But it's difficult because I haven't been through something like this. But this is something that keeps coming up. And I really think Abba wants to use this platform, wants to use my ministry or the people I know to just bring the right people together, to be able to assist and give a platform for these ladies where they can feel safe and to share stories. So today's session is probably not going to be a nugget because there is really much to share, and I'm going to try to keep it to the point. Like I've said, so many of the people I've counseled, I've heard terrible stories of. But recently, there are people very close to me that has entrusted to me their stories and told me that they have been the victim either of abuse or molestation or rape. And it was people I really knew well, and I never knew this about them. And it made me so sad because I could see how lonely they were and the trauma just when it surfaced, just how terrible it is. And I realized there were some commonalities between the stories. And I just thought maybe we must just talk about these things because I know, it's not even that I think, I know there are people out there who still sit with this, that hasn't maybe told anyone, who hasn't dealt with it. So that is why I'm having this talk this morning. So I would just like to start with a prayer. So if you can all just close your eyes. Abba Father, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to be able to sit with sisters this morning and talk about this very heavy but very important subject. And it just breaks my heart to know how many women, how many of your daughters have been violated and are being violated, Abba. Abba, Father, I want to come and I want to seal us off in the name of Yahushua and by his blood. I want to ask you to cover every listener who will listen to this recording and who are active listening now, Abba, that you will protect them, that the enemy will not come and steal, because this is very important. It's important things for them to hear. Thank you for using us and help us to be the body, the hands that wash the feet. And I really just want every listener who has gone through something like this to feel loved, to feel that they do have someone to talk to, and that there are people in the body who care and that will help them and take their hands and just support them on this journey. I pray that in the name of Yahushua. Amen.
Amen.
So this morning when I got dressed, I just really asked the Holy Spirit, what must I wear? The Ruach HaKodesh. And he told me to wear white. So I've got white on. I've got white on and I'm wearing my priestly prayer shawl with white stripes. And I was just really feeling that the message of today is that I want to tell each victim that no matter how the enemy wants you to feel unclean, that you are pure and that you are made pure and whole again through the blood of Yahushua, and that you are in his eyes, his priestly bride. So just hold on to that. And before we start, I just want to, what is Norman's? Norman's in place on behalf of the body of the Messiah, on behalf of family, on behalf of those people who have failed every victim. I want to use this morning to tell you I'm sorry. I'm sorry for every child who has been violated. And told their parents, and they didn't believe them. And that's one of the things I hear so often, and it just breaks my heart. It breaks my heart to hear that a little girl or a young woman will go to a father and tell him, Daddy, somebody has molested me, somebody has raped me, and they don't believe them. They don't support them. I'm so sorry for you. Your parents are there to be supposed to protect you, to support you, to guide you. And I think so many parents in the body have failed their children. And I just really want to, on their behalf today, tell you that I'm sorry. And I really trust that Abba will give you spiritual parents and spiritual guardians that will help you and that will cover you and will be a covering for you. So I'm sorry for everybody that didn't believe you. I'm sorry for every family member that's responsible for the abuse. That's even worse. When they're supposed to be your covering and your protector, and they are the one doing the abusing. I'm just so sorry for that. And I'm sorry for all the judgment that you might have experienced in the past. People who think that what you've gone through is not that bad, or you over-exaggerating. I'm sorry for that and the trauma that you had to go through. So if you've went through sexual abuse or molestation, the first thing I want you to really know and understand is whenever we go through trauma and something bad, especially if there's shame and guilt connected to that, the enemy wants to keep that in the dark, because in the dark is really where we don't see the fullness of what is going on. That's the place where something like that will fester, and it just keeps you in bondage there. So the number one game plan of the enemy that you really need to understand is he wants to keep this in the dark. He doesn't want you to bring it into the light. He wants you, because that is where he can keep you in bondage. So we need to bring all of this into the light. And I think there are wrong ways to do it, and there's right ways to do it. I think what is also very sad is the number one thing is that you need to tell somebody. I've worked with women who haven't told anybody and who has lived with this secret for very long because they just feel so ashamed. It feels so huge that they don't have the heart to face it. They just don't have the energy, the capacity to face this, because I think they think they're going to have to face it alone, or maybe people won't believe me, or just that, they don't have the capacity. And what also happens, what is very sad, is like I've said, is that sometimes they will tell somebody, then they don't believe them. So it's very difficult with young children, because obviously the person they will tell first is their parents maybe, or a bigger sister or somebody. So if that was your case and you've told somebody and they didn't believe you when you were younger, I'm so sorry, but I want you to really reach out and pray and ask Abba to reveal somebody that you can trust, that will be able to help you heal through this traumatic experience. But don't keep it to yourself, because if you keep it to yourself, you're really giving the enemy what he wants. You're keeping it in the dark. If it doesn't come into the light, it won't heal. I always use the picture to tell somebody, if you're a little child and you hurt your foot, and you step, let's say you step into a rusty old nail. It hurts so much stepping in that nail, okay? And that's a traumatic event. But now you have to go to somebody to take out that nail and to clean the wound. And that also hurts. Sometimes it's even worse than the event itself, because the healing takes longer. It hurts to pull out the nail. It hurts to clean the wound. It hurts to every time you have to loosen the bandage and clean it again to let it heal. You have to revisit that pain. But if you don't do that, that wound will become septic, and it will cost you to lose a lot more. And that's really a simple example to just explain that's how it works in the spirit. So we need to clean those wounds, and it isn't easy to go back to that event, and it will be traumatic. But if something comes to the light, if something comes to the surface and it's on its way out, it will hurt, but it's part of the healing process. So that's why it's important to get somebody that you can trust and confide in, that will support you through this healing journey. I think the number one thing, and it was confirmed, I spoke to a friend of mine who went through abuse, and I've spoken to a lot of ladies now in the last 2 days to ask them what was the worst things for them, what advice will they give other victims. And I think the one most important thing is forgiveness.
Sure.
There is a system and an order to Abba's heavenly court, and he cannot walk this road of healing with you if you don't forgive. And forgiveness isn't an easy process always. I want you to understand, forgiveness doesn't mean that you are saying what that person did was okay. It's not okay, and they will stand before the judge one day. But forgiveness is you stopping to blame yourself, or it's like Michelle always says, it's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. That's what unforgiveness does to you. You're only hurting yourself by not forgiving, because that person doesn't know what's going on in your heart. Your unforgiveness is not doing anything to them. You are just putting yourself in bondage. So it's so important to forgive. And I think a good exercise, what I always give all my patients if I do counseling with them, is to take a paper and you divide that paper into 3 columns. And in the first column, you write down the names of the people who participated in this event, directly and indirectly. That includes the person who was responsible for the abuse. You write down his or her name. If you don't know the name, you can just write, the perpetrator or whatever. And then, but that also includes to write down the names of yourself, because sometimes you need to forgive yourself. Many of the women that I deal with think on some level that they are to blame for what happened, that maybe they could have stopped it in some way. There's always a level of self-forgiveness that you need to deal with. And as you write down this list, the set-apart spirit will guide you. And you have to sit through Abba. It's not something that you do hastily. You really have to work through it point by point. A third thing that you can sometimes write down is, in many cases, is the child's parents, that you need to forgive them, your mother or your father. And sometimes it's not for that they physically did something wrong. I had a case where a little girl was kind of abused when she was very little, and her parents didn't know about that. And she never, as an adult, even held them accountable or was ever mad at them. But one day, she had recurring dreams and nightmares that she knew was because of this abuse. And she's dealt with so much of the things that Abba showed, and she couldn't understand, where's this now coming from? Where's the open door? And so she asked him, Abba, please show me. Why am I having these dreams again? And he told her, you need to forgive your parents. And she was like, and she knew it was him speaking because she never had a thought of unforgiveness towards them. And he said, no, you need to forgive your parents. And she was, but why? I'm not mad at them. I don't, I've never been mad at them. And he said, but when you were a little girl of 4 or 5 years old, in that moment of abuse, in your subconscious even, you were thinking, where are my mom? Where are my dad? Why are they not protecting me? And there was hurt in that little girl. So sometimes when we go through trauma, that moment of trauma is captured like a photograph. That exact moment, how you felt, what you were thinking, what was the emotions, what was the smell. So many of the victims tell me they can remember the exact smell of the man who did this to them. And when they go into reliving that moment, they can remember that and it becomes a trigger. So you really need to ask Abba to take you back to that exact moment of trauma, and you need to heal all of those things and show you all of those emotions. But going back to the little girl, so that little girl, whenever you've lived through trauma, you need to go back to that moment and ask Abba, show me who I need to forgive. What thoughts or what emotions that I have that I cannot remember. Yeah. And he will be faithful to show you. Another thing to write down on this exercise is to write down Abba's name. And I know it sounds harsh. And I know deep down all of us know that we don't fully understand and that we don't have like a right to be mad at him. But sometimes we are. And that we need to be honest with ourselves and truthful. Sometimes we are mad at God. We don't understand, where was he? Why didn't he protect me? Why did he let this happen? And that just means it's something you need to work through. Abba, I think I'm mad at you. I want to forgive you. I know you didn't actually do something wrong, but then help me to understand, help me to work through this. And then, everybody's story is different. So you need to go through your story and write down any names that you think you need to forgive. And it's a long process. So in the first column, that's where you write the name of the person that you need to forgive. In the second column, you write down, what did they do to you? Why do you need to forgive them? For example, I need to forgive my mother and my father because I felt like they didn't protect me. So that's what you write in the second column. In the third column, you need to write down, how did that make you feel? Okay? They didn't protect me. It made me feel unloved. It made me feel abandoned. It made me feel alone. Maybe you've told your parents that they didn't believe you. So that's the second thing. I told my dad he didn't believe me. And it made me feel like a liar. It made me feel guilty. Maybe I did something wrong. So in the third column, you need to write down, how did it make me feel? And that helps us to identify the wounds that you have, because we need to go and deal with all of those wounds. So forgiveness is not just about forgiving the person and continuing. It's about also helping you to identify the wounds and go there and let Abba deal with that. So, sorry, I just want to get a tissue because I cried. Now my nose is running the whole time.
I think on that, while Steve just stepped out quickly, what I just want to mention is when she spoke about a deeper level and on your subconscious, it reminded me also of an iceberg. So you probably have heard of this before, but just to mention it again, if you look at an iceberg, you only see the tip of the iceberg, and the rest is underneath the water, underneath the surface. And I think this that you are explaining now, Steph, is so important to really dig into the subconscious, things that you have already forgotten or things that you live with but you are not aware of, to go into the bottom of that iceberg to really heal those deep wounds. Yes. And it's just something I wanted to mention as well.
One of the verses that I go to when counseling as well is Jeremiah 33, verse 3, where he says, "Ask me, and I will show you things that you did not know, and I will reveal things." And that, I believe that talks about exactly that, the things that we don't know, things that are in our subconscious, things that happened too early to us that we don't know and can't remember. And he's faithful to reveal us with things like that. Memories will resurface, or he will show you in dreams what happened. And he shows you that not to traumatize you, but to help you heal and to deal with these things. So we were speaking about 3 columns and what you need to write in the last column. So Rita has a nice way of always explaining it. She says, when something happens to you, you live through trauma, you create a wound. Okay, so now you have a wound, and that wound's like a piece of Velcro, that rough edge, and all the unclean spirits, all the lies, all other wounds come and they stick to it like pieces of wool. And it's difficult to get off. If you have tried to get a piece of wool of some Velcro, it's difficult. But as soon as you bring it into the light and you invite Abba in, it's like pouring oil over that. And it makes the surface so oily, because he says the name of Yahushua is like oil being poured forth. And we know that his name and that oil is used for healing. And those things then can no longer stick. They become to come loose. And it takes time to clean it, but it really helps. So yes, we need to identify the wounds and work through that. And then when you look at the wounds, for example, unforgiveness to us, behind every wound, behind all of these thoughts are spirits. We need to understand that there's a spirit of unforgiveness. There's a spirit of guilt. There's a spirit of shame. So I want all the victims to always know and remember, you did not deserve this. You are not responsible for what this person did to you. But as soon as you've received the wound, you have a responsibility and a choice in your healing. And you have a choice to, at one point, say, I believe that I'm not guilty. Abba has now told me I'm not guilty. I didn't deserve this, so I'm not going to listen to the spirit of guilt anymore. Abba, please forgive me for listening to this voice and the sound of unforgiveness and of guilt. I want to let go. And another thing I just want to say about unforgiveness is, that's very important to remember, is that forgiveness is not a feeling. You're not going to feel like forgiving. Forgiveness is a choice that you make. And sometimes it's a choice that you're going to have to make more than once. You're going to maybe have to forgive the perpetrator more than once, go back here. But the more that you make this choice and you ask Abba, I want to forgive. I forgive this person. I ask you to change my heart and to make me free of that person. Please come and heal my heart. Please put your love and your forgiveness in my heart. The more you do that, the more your heart's going to change and he's going to free you up. You just have to constantly choose to forgive and forgive and forgive. But we cannot go into the court of law and ask Abba for healing if unforgiveness covers your heart. It's just the way it works in the spirit. So the most important thing is forgiveness, to turn your face and your trauma and your hurt, to turn it towards Abba and allow him into that deep, deep wound. What did I want to say now? There was so much. So another thing that I wanted to say is that most of the time the victims really struggle with shame. That is just understandable because Rita also, she says, if you hear somebody has cancer and they've had this marker on their DNA that makes them susceptible to cancer, and they get cancer, you kind of feel sorry for them because now they've inherited this thing and they've got this death marker, and you just feel sad for them. But then somebody comes along and they inherit this marker of abuse or of sexual sin, and we just judge them. We don't really feel sorry for them. But the thing is, I can understand why people struggle with shame, because sex is seen as something very dirty and shameful and something that happens in the dark. And shame has a devastating effect on your health. Something Abba has revealed to me over time is that many of the women, not all of them, but many of the women who have suffered sexual abuse, either in their own lives or in their bloodline, struggle with issues with their gut. So there's a big link between gut health and sexual disease. And we need to remember that most of our emotions is not formed in the brain, it's formed in our gut. So a lot of what happens in our soul dimension is linked to our gut. And that unresolved trauma will affect you so bad. So I just quickly want to, this is another reason why I'm encouraging you to deal with it. Because number one, obviously, if you don't deal with this trauma, it will affect you in many ways. I've heard very sad stories and seen how people who haven't dealt with that, they turn to other things to help to relieve the pain and the trauma, and they start abusing other things, be it alcohol, drugs, whatever, and that has a big effect on their family. It has a big effect on their children. So if you see these fruits in your life and you know the reason why you are turning to these other substances is because something happened to you, please seek help, because you are now also destroying the lives of your children. And we don't realize how that will impact them in so many ways. The second thing is, as Rita also says, what you don't deal with, you pass on. So trauma that's not dealt with, you think you are doing people a favor by hiding it, by not talking about it. You don't want your husband or your children or your family to know. But if you don't deal with this, that trauma is going to be passed on to your children. And you can go read about it. It's called epigenetics. I've got a whole teaching online, it's in Afrikaans, about epigenetics and how it works. So epigenetics are not your genes itself that change, but it's the switch that turns a gene on and off. So let's say for each gene in your DNA, there's a little light switch that can go on and off. So we call them markers. And there's different things that can affect a switch to be switched on and off. And it can be from your diet, but one of the main things is trauma. And the actual scientific term that they use for epigenetics is the sins of the forefathers. Because they've realized that if you go look at Holocaust survivors, up until the third and fourth generations, you can see the effects of the trauma and the same diseases that you see manifesting right through, because those people were not equipped to handle with that trauma. The good news is most of the studies show that epigenetics is reversible. The marks of trauma on your epigenetics, you can reverse and switch them off. So that's why counseling and all of this is so important. One of the videos I talk about in the epigenetics teaching was an experiment that they did on mice. So they took a bunch of mice and they put them in a cage and they will shock them with electricity. Very lightly, but just enough to startle the mice. And every time they shocked the mice, they released the scent of cherry blossoms. So the mice began to associate the smell with the trauma. So they did that a couple of times, and then they stopped actually shocking them with electricity. They will only release the scent of the cherry blossom. And as soon as they smell that, the mice will go into fear and anxiety, and they will start to show all the signs of trauma, even though they are not being shocked. But what is more interesting is they then stopped altogether with the shocking and with the smell. They left these mice. So now they've had a traumatic experience that is associated with a smell that's a trigger. Now they continue to live on. Okay, it's not happening anymore. Then they started to breed with these mice. And they tested it for the first generation, second generation, third generation, and to some of them, even up to the fourth generation. They took the baby mice, and when they released the smell of cherry blossom, the mice will show signs of stress and trauma. They were never shocked. It was their parents who went through that shock. But the response, the trauma response, that is what the children inherit. Sometimes they don't understand where it comes from. So it just comes to show that even, in science, they've proven that what you don't deal with, you pass on. And with abuse and sexual abuse, there's many forms of that. It can be later manifest as intimacy issues that your daughter might have in a relationship, in a marriage. And she won't know where this comes from because it comes from trust issues and trauma, maybe that she inherited from her mother. It can be in the form of, so I can't exactly tell you how it works in the spirit. I just know there is a link because you will see a pattern. Many times when a girl is molested as a child, it's as if she gets a marker in the spirit, and those other spirits picks it up and she becomes a victim. If she'll meet somebody completely new, but in the spirit he will choose her to rape or molest out of a group of children, because it's as in the spirit they can sense that. And those markers can also be transferred in the spirit. So it can go on from fear. There's a lot of things that can be.
On an example on that as well, and I heard it the other day, but it's also a woman, her husband was unfaithful to her, and she had 3 daughters, and she got a divorce, and all 3 of her daughters went through exactly the same experience where their husbands had been unfaithful and they also divorced. So really, it just makes that a reality to see that it really can transfer from generations to generations if we don't deal with it before if we don't deal with it. That's the important part.
That's so important, because one of the victims I spoke to recently, she said, and she lives in fear for her daughters. She goes home every day to look, are they okay? That something maybe happened to them. Because unfortunately she's in the position where she needs to work and somebody else takes care of them. So she cannot be with them 24/7. And it's not, you cannot live in fear like that. And I don't want you to feel like that now something's going to happen to them, because I really do know and believe that if you deal with this and you let Abba into your life and their lives, he will protect you and he will heal you. That is why it is so important. What else did I want to say? There was so much. But I do think I want to caution people. Again, so many of the stories that I've heard the last couple of years, to be honest with you, I'm trying to think. Only one of the stories that I've personally heard, that the girl was molested by a person she did not know. All of the other stories were family members or close friends, people who they trusted. And that makes me so, so sad. So I do want to caution you. I don't want you to live in fear, but I also think we need to be cautious these days. Or not even these days, because it's been like that almost forever, that you never know what you don't know. Don't leave your children, especially your daughters. But it's not only girls who get raped and sexually abused. That's unfortunately the truth. Don't leave your children with people. You are their covering. Don't let them sleep over. It's just not healthy. Until your child's really an adult and old enough, don't allow that, because I think it just creates opportunities for people. And with this, I'm not saying that you shouldn't trust family members and shouldn't trust other people, but it's very just important to have that boundary and to say, okay, this is just something we will not allow. Just don't unnecessarily put your child in that position. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Yes, what I do want to say, if you haven't told anybody about what happened to you and you would like to speak to somebody, but maybe it's too hard the first time, I want to encourage you to journal. Take a journal and write down what happened, write down how you feel. And even if the first step is in trusting somebody with your journal, maybe it's so hard for you to voice what happened. Let them read it. But if you can get to a point, many of the victims have told me, for them to actually hear themselves say the words, what has happened to me, and to voice it, made a big difference, because they've silenced it for so long that it's actually almost, did it really happen to me? Didn't I maybe overreact or whatever? But if you voice it and you hear it, that's that moment when that what is in darkness comes into the light. So it's such an important step. And I want to reach out to you. If you really don't have anywhere to turn or anybody that you can trust, you can reach out to Milk and Honey, and I'll try to put you in touch with somebody, or, you know, arrange a session where you can just at least share with somebody and start on this journey of healing. And I know we will hear a lot of messages after this, which will say, me too. It happened to me too. And I think we are at a stage where we need to encourage each other and take hands and help each other heal. And for you to know you are not alone. I think that's also that spirit of loneliness, that you are alone in this. Nobody's going to help me. Nobody's going to believe me. That's a lie. So I really want to come and trust Abba and ask him, Abba, for every person who's listening who has been a victim, that they will not feel alone. We come and we bind the spirit of loneliness. We come and bind the spirit of shame and guilt and fear, Abba. And we ask that they will bring whatever it is that they keep in darkness, to bring it into the light. We come and we bind every lie of the enemy, that voice of the enemy that lies to them, that you will silence that, and that they will hear your voice of redemption and healing calling. Another important thing that I want to mention is with trauma, if you pray through trauma and work through this, remember, we are spirit, soul, and body. So you also live, you relive, but you also experience the trauma on all three of those levels. So you need to heal on all three of those levels. Mm-hmm. So after you've done forgiveness and you've walked through that, you need to go back to that moment of trauma. And first of all, you're going to have to to invite Abba into that place, because that sound, that frequency of the trauma will sit in your spirit, in your soul, and in your body. And you will even have to go and cleanse yourself. Ask Abba to remove the trauma and the cell memory of that day and of that trauma, to remove it physically from your cells and to cleanse you, to cleanse your soul, that it won't trigger you. I mean, obviously you're never going to, it's not going to be a blank, like you're going to forget it happened. I don't think that's ever the case, but Abba will equip you to overcome, so that you won't go into shock and trauma when you think about what happened. You will obviously still remember it, and it will always be terrible, but that you won't physically go into shock and trauma. I think really Abba can heal you from that. And he says you need to wash your thoughts with the water of the word, to try to replace, whenever you have a thought of shame and guilt, to replace those with verses. And that's how you pray, and you use the word of Abba to heal you and to cleanse you. That's very important as well. And I think after all this is done, and you think you're at a place where you've dealt with many of the wounds, that you need to do deliverance, because there is a spirit behind that. And there will be many spirits, but I think whoever does the deliverance for you, or even if you do it yourself, that the set spot spirit will guide you, but that you do deliverance and ask Abba to remove these spirits from your life. But it's important to clean the Velcro before we do deliverance. Otherwise, they'll come back and try to stick to it again. So it's really a journey. It's a journey of healing. Don't expect it to be overnight. But be brave. I want to bless you with a spirit of courage and braveness to face this. Oh, this is the last thing I want to tell. I once watched a documentary on a girl, I think it was in America, and she was abducted from her home, from a bed. The guy broke into their house. It was a guy who did, I think, gardening services for the family. So he knew them, but he didn't know them well. And he broke into their home and he stole her, and he took her to his cabin, and he lived somewhere in the woods. Like it sounds like a real Hollywood movie. Sure. Even though he was the one who abducted her, he wasn't the only accomplice. He abused her together with his partner, which was a woman. But they locked her up in a room and they abused her. I can't remember for how many months. I can't also remember how exactly she got free, or I think she escaped by herself. Somehow she got out of this room and she escaped, and she got back to civilization. But the part that really stood out for me was afterwards. I can't remember if it was in the court case or in an interview, or I think maybe it was something her mother told her. But she came to this decision, and she said, this man stole so much of my life. He physically came into my room and he stole me. He locked me away for months, and he stole those months of my life, those days I'll never get back. He stole my innocence. He stole my purity. He stole so much of me. But today I'm free. I'm standing here, and I choose that he will not steal another day of my life. Because if you allow the enemy to keep you in bondage, to keep you in shame and guilt and fear, you're allowing that person who maybe stole something from you 8 years ago to keep stealing from you. To say enough is enough. I won't allow you to do any more damage to me or my family. So I choose to let this go. I choose to move on, and I choose to deal with this and not allow him to steal any more from you. And that's really just what I want to leave you with today. So I want to encourage you to be brave and not allow the enemy to steal from you any longer, because Abba is bigger than that. His love is bigger than that. The power of what Yahushua did on the cross, his name, his blood, he can heal you and he can make you free, and you can become an instrument in his hand to help so many other women. Really, there's a lot of need, and I just want to end today's session with that.
Awesome. Thank you, Steph. And thank you also for bringing the topic into the light. I also want to, from my side, also say that we never have to face anything alone. Abba sends people along our path to go through things with us, but also to support us, to pray with us. Even if we sit together and we don't even talk, we only talk to him, we only pray together. There is power in that.
Yes.
And just to confirm what you said, that you are never alone in anything. And Abba is firstly always with you, and his children, your fellow sisters and brothers in Christ, is also with you.
Amen. Have a blessed day. Oh, where did you guys go? Have a blessed day, everybody, and thank you for joining us. We will see you again next week. Bye,
Thank
Lucia.
you. Bye.